All right, here we go. Welcome everybody. Looks like we're up to the core unit launch pod session number 8. Really excited here to have the sustainable ecosystem scaling core unit with us. They'll be talking to us a bit about their proposal, and I don't want to take away too much of the thunder. So with that, I'll kick it over to Juan, and feel free everyone to kind of interrupt, ask questions as we go along. I believe we got some slides to start with, so we'll go with that. Juan?
Thank you, Bros. I'm very happy to finally be presenting here on this call. There's a big team that put a lot of work and effort into this. So today, Lenka, Wouter, and myself are going to be presenting, but we're speaking on the name of many others. But yeah, without further ado, let's jump into the agenda. And what we're going to be covering today, in case you want to structure your questions and interruptions. So the first one is the why, how, and what. So why do we think that this is important? How do we want to achieve it? And well, what is that we're trying to build here? Then, well, we're going to be going over this, but we put a lot of focus on research, on applied research. And there are a lot of models that we've been working on that we would like to continue working on. So we're going to be presenting some draft for decentralized capital work and workforce. And finally, we will go more in detail into things that we've been doing, the next steps, and how we're planning to achieve this. So yes, without further ado, Wouter.
Yes, thank you, Juan. So hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Wouter. I'm currently working as the head of engineering at the Maker Foundation and looking forward for the next stage, which is making this core unit happen. So I want to talk about the mission and vision that we've created, but first let's start with the kind of the background question that got all this started. So Juan, if you can go to the next slide. So as you might imagine, the Sustainable Ecosystem Scaling Core Unit is about scaling the decentralized ecosystem. And the starting point that we have here is to think about scaling centralized organizations first. So we think that with the introduction of the DAI stablecoin, Maker made its first contribution, and now the next one is really to scale up and make the ecosystem bigger. And if we compare that indeed to a centralized organization, then we might say that in a centralized organization, this is a well-known recipe how to scale up. You start with a single team, people start to specialize, and then of course the different teams, they split out in the typical hierarchical structure, and that structure has clearly defined communication lines up and down the hierarchy. And ultimately, managing a centralized organization at scale means working around alignment, autonomy, and accountability of all these different teams. And there are well-known tools for that. So Juan, if you go to the next slide. Moving down the hierarchy, typically we get alignment via the mission, vision, and strategy that is broken down into objectives, and that is further fed down the hierarchy of the teams into smaller objectives. Top down, we're also allocating the capital that is necessary to make sure that the teams can function. They have the necessary resources. And then bottom up, the teams are delivering the key results by contributing the expertise that they have. And they're also reporting on the work that they're doing so that there can be a form of evaluation, which really brings these three elements of alignment, autonomy, and accountability. But going to the next slide, if we think about this in a decentralized organization, it's very different. And while the starting point is the same, in the beginning, we might think that the decentralized organization with just one team, maybe splitting up in a few teams, is not that different from a centralized organization. but especially the lines of communication are a lot more chaotic. And the question is, how do we get these three things, the alignment, autonomy, and accountability? So going to the next slide again. This is a recipe that is not well known, and that we believe requires a lot of research and a lot of work from everyone in the DAO to figure out how we should go about this. As you think about alignment, you may imagine that in a decentralized organization, maybe we will be using different tools than in a centralized organization. For example, we will work more around culture, probably more with education to align people in the DAO. And of course, in crypto, we know that we want to install the positive feedback loops that really encourage the behavior that we want to see, and that discourage the behavior that we don't want to see. It's about putting these incentives in place, and yeah, it's what I call a carrot economy, because everyone is participating on a voluntary basis. There really are no sticks. We can't force people to do anything. The only thing we can do is put the carrots in place to make people do what we would like them to do. Autonomy, of course, is kind of the default in a decentralized organization, but that also leads to some challenges, because as everyone is basically doing what they like to do on a voluntary basis, what might happen is that there might be responsibility gaps. So this is equivalent to maybe living together in the same house, and everyone has a few tasks, and someone needs to take out the trash, and no one likes doing it. In a decentralized organization, there are also certain tasks that need to be done, and the question is, how do we make sure these tasks happen if there's no one there to enforce it? If we want to do that, it's to protect the common infrastructure, and of course to avoid the failure of the protocol, these critical failure scenarios. And that brings us to the last point, which is the accountability, which is, I think, typically the first challenge that people think about in a decentralized organization. And we may think that we require the necessary checks and balances, that we require a lot of transparency, maybe auditing mechanisms, and ultimately count on competition and budget slashing to make sure that the teams in the ecosystem are somehow held accountable, and that they deliver good quality. So these are all complicated questions in a domain that really needs to be explored a lot further. And that's what we hope to contribute to with the Sustainable Ecosystem Scaling Core Unit. So this brings us to our mission, which is to sustainably grow the Maker Protocol's moats. And we want to do that by removing barriers between the decentralized workforce, the capital, and the work. If we look at the vision that we want to work towards, so we want to support the decentralized, effective, and scalable economy on top of the Maker Protocol that continues to push forward the growth in a sustainable manner. And yeah, we believe there are basically three aspects to that. In a decentralized, effective, and scalable economy, we want to see the best and most successful onboarding experience for new participants. So we know how important it is to attract new talent, and also to retain it. So we want to have the highest retention rate in the industry. Now, once people are onboarded, it becomes a question of efficiency. So how do you make sure that people who are onboarded into this decentralized economy, how can they find the capital they need to work on the best projects to work on? And by the best projects, we mean those projects that work, that optimally drives protocol growth, and also that is most fulfilling for its participants, because we do want that high retention rate. And specifically in the context of the Maker Protocol, we have always that extra requirement, which is that we need to make sure that we avoid those critical failure scenarios. So we need resilient safety mechanisms in place to prevent protocol failure. But at the same time, as we've seen, sometimes that can lead to slow pace of innovation, and that's something, of course, that we also need to avoid, because that doesn't work in the long term. So we need to combine preventing protocol failure in a decentralized context with ample space for rapid innovation and experimentation. Needless to say, that's quite a challenge, and yeah, that's what we want to participate in as the Sustainable Ecosystem Scaling Core Unit. So Juan, do you want to talk a bit about the strategy?
Yeah, so that was a little bit on the why, and this is the how, right? So how do we think that we can achieve this? So we focused a lot of energy on building this continuous improvement and scale, kind of like a circle where we can actually retrofit with the things that we've learned. So as you may notice, in the very center is the research, and we're going to be speaking about this a lot during our presentation and in general, because we believe that's the way forward. But it's, of course, applied research. So at the very beginning, we need to identify the opportunities and do a risk assessment, set priorities, identify bottlenecks, and move forward with the things that are worth the most at every single time. Then apply this research that we're doing and help the whole MakerDAO ecosystem grow in that way. And finally, the last part would be the incubation, which is if we notice that there's a need that needs to be served, we want to be there to help talent become this independent core unit that can subsist on its own, and we want to be there to facilitate that. The other two things that we want to do, which we believe that they are complementary, is the sponsorship part, and we can speak about that more later. But it's having this budget to fund these projects that are limited in scope and eventually can become core units, or if we decide that they're not worth it, kind of like kill it with very quick and fast iterations. And finally, the other thing, with all this research and all this knowledge that we're producing, we want to be very open and transparent and focus on the continuous improvement, self-accountability and auditing. We've been speaking about this, about allowing people or core units to set their own standards and be held accountable versus what they set for themselves. And the other pillar would be allowing people to, or making everything very transparent and sharing the best practices. And finally, we want to become a trusted third party in case that we need, for example, to execute a dark spell. And again, we can speak more about this in the future. And yeah, going back to the research, as I was mentioning, we have been analyzing and kind of drafting different models, and we would like to have these conversations around these research models. So we're going to introduce very quickly as a kind of like showing you the draft and how we want to work and how we want to focus the discussions: decentralized capital, decentralized work, and then decentralized workforce. So if we go to the first one, which is the decentralized capital, right now we are seeing this as a protocol that it's relatively hard to find sustainable growth. So as Wouter was mentioning, we already saw really, really good growth, but it will be a challenge to do this in a decentralized way and reaching the next 10x, right? So we've been already seeing some challenges. The first one is that maker holders have limited bandwidth. This results in low voting turn up, so there are not a lot of voters that have the time and the energy to go through the whole process. So we see that we should limit the options to these voters ideally. Then, and this goes back to what Wouter was saying, we need to connect vision, goals, and work. So there's this fluid things that we can see in changing and establishing the vision. So we've been seeing already SEP, for example, that mentioned this last year. Then there was a group to establish the vision of MakerDAO, and we see that this is not an easy task, and to get all these decentralized contributors behind that, it's kind of a hard task. Then on the impact, right? So it's extremely hard to measure the impact that each contributor has. We have this experiment going on with SourceGrid, and it's going well. Again, I recommend you to go back to the forum and read more about it if you want very interesting results. But by no means it's comprehensive, and it should be improved as well. And finally, something that we would like to mention is that right now the delegates is something that that's coming to life, but it's or we believe it's a full-time job, and not only for a person, but potentially for a whole team of people doing data analytics, inspecting what's happening and whatnot. So those are things that we definitely need to consider and are challenges for the capital allocation. And finally, the funding barriers and continuity. We have these two things that we need to consider. One of them is the access to capital. So the best project that can help MakerDAO the most or that has the most impact should be getting the capital in ideally an easy way. And on the other hand, we need to think about the job security of the contributors and make sure that they feel that they can contribute in a safe way. So again, and as a draft model, this is something we've been working on, which, well, I'll try to explain it. But the maker voters basically are delegating their votes to different parties or delegates, and potentially you could delegate different amounts of maker to different parties based on what they promise that they're going to fund. So the whole part, or the majority of the work is done by these governance parties that are going to end up funding domain teams and core units, which can on their own turn fund each other if that's what they need. But there's a lot of coordination and allocation that will need to be done by someone. So we believe that this is potentially one of the things that should be considered. The other thing that we've been speaking with the larger community is setting up a budget cap. Again, Seb is working on a financial model for MakerDAO, including the expenses, and this is potentially something that could be useful for the maker voters, saying like the whole expenses of the DAO should be capped at this amount. Ideally, it will be less. So there's a control of the finances. And then, of course, what we were speaking before is that the maker voters would be able to have this liquid plutocratic election, so they can change whenever they want their vote from one to the next. But to help the core units and the contributors, there will be this quarterly capital allocation. So at least there is some stability in what's happening in the scene. I don't know if this is clear, or if we should take questions, or maybe just move to the next model and tackle them at the end. I guess you can keep going about them.
Yes. So as Juan was talking about the first aspect, which is decentralized capital, looking at the bottlenecks that we're facing today with MKR voters having limited bandwidth, and coming up with models that might better scale the governance around this. A second element to look at is the way that we currently do work in the DAO, and how we can once again avoid bottlenecks that would inhibit growth. One thing that we noticed in the past and currently is, for example, with the launch of Liquidations 2.0, is that the work is quite focused around the work that the smart contracts team is doing, and that the throughput really is limited to what the team can handle in a safe way. And yeah, we would like to start a few conversations that can help to increase that throughput of work, and at the same time further improve the security of the system. And this is basically what is presented here in the model. So today we are treating everything with Fort Knox security level because we assume that when there is even there's even a small change of a failure in the protocol, then we might put the entire value, the total value locked in the protocol at risk. However, if we can structure the work differently, then it should be possible to basically create multiple tiers that reduce the risk for the team working on releasing work in that tier. And in that way, you can actually have multiple teams working on smart contract development, and we don't need to have everything pass through the same team that is already overburdened with the actual critical functionality that they should be reviewing. And this is the model as presented here. So what we could do, instead of treating everything as if it's in the mainnet tier 3 that has the entire 9 billion value at risk, we can create a second tier, mainnet tier 2, that would actually guarantee, for example, through formal verification, that the damage that can be done with any smart contract that is deployed in that tier can never be bigger than 900 million, for example. And of course, you can go a step further and say, then we have a tier 1 that is for experiments, and that would only put just 1% of the capital at risk. You can go further and parallelize the work by having teams delivering to the Covent testnet instead of delivering to the mainnet. And entire features can be developed and deployed to the Covent testnet, and already have our integrators, for example, work with that version, while this adds no extra burden to the work of the smart contracts team that controls access to the highest mainnet tier. It's even the case that for testing out features that you can go a step further and just do rapid prototyping that may require no smart contracts at all, but instead apply a well-known practice from software engineering, which is to stub the backend and basically have fake contracts that would be used to build a fully functional UI on top of, so that instead of today us building like a single UI that is the final version of the product, and that we only validate at the very end of the funnel, that we can run multiple experiments and that multiple teams can work on that. So once again, improving the throughput of the work. And then around the feature requirements and what we would actually build, there is a lot of work that can be parallelized there as well. So the technical analysis, for example, doesn't need to happen necessarily by the core smart contracts team that manages access to the highest security tier. So this is next to the kind of the delegation and voting model that we have to allocate capital, is another example of a model that we've been working on, in this case, to reduce the bottlenecks in the workflow and to allow for a higher throughput in the ecosystem and more participants and more parallelization. One thing to notice is that this particular model will also introduce additional roles into the ecosystem. And that brings us to the question, how do we actually onboard the talent, not just smart contract developers, but also all these other profiles that can help with all the work that can be done in the ecosystem in parallel. And this is what Lenka will be talking about next.
Awesome. I did notice we did have a few questions in the chat. I don't know if anyone had a mic and wanted to hop on. If not, I'm happy to read as well. Saw a couple from Jordan and Eli there.
Yes, so the question is, how do you foresee different projects being prioritized within different tiers? Yes, well, that actually goes back to the previous model, which is the capital allocation. So if we go back to that slide to just very quickly walk through it. So you have these governance parties, as we've called it here, that really do two things. They define their vision for the future of the protocol, and just like a political party, it could be very specific, or it could be just a comprehensive vision of the entire maker ecosystem. So let's say that the protocol growth party believes that there are a number of priorities that we should set to safeguard the growth of the protocol. And then they would collect support for that by campaigning with the MKR voters, and then as they receive proportionally a slice of the budget, then they would use that budget, and they would have, for example, a team of analysts that figures out which projects would optimally contribute to those goals that they are setting. So that's the thing that you can't really simplify or like automate easily. And it's quite a lot of work to figure out as the number of teams is growing, as the work that is being done in parallel has higher bandwidth, everything that's happening at the same time. What exactly contributes the most to the objectives that we have? That's a very difficult question to answer, and would exactly be the job of these governance parties to, on the one hand, define the vision with the objectives, and on the other hand, figure out, given those objectives, where should we allocate our capital, which leads to the prioritization of the work. So in this case, this party would, of course, prioritize the work that improves the growth of the protocol, and would deprioritize and maybe not allocate capital to work that does not contribute to the growth of the protocol. The second question was, are you planning on integrating or incubating all of the mentioned teams into the SES core unit? For example, smart contract devs, security auditors, etc. No. So the vision we have is that there will be like the pattern of being an incubator or having an incubator program as a core unit, that will be a pattern that is repeated throughout the ecosystem with multiple core units. And yeah, it's important that we clearly define a scope of the kind of projects that would go through our own incubation program. And the way that we want to prioritize it is that we look at our mission, which is to make sure that the Maker protocol can grow sustainably, and that we remove those bottlenecks that inhibit growth. So we do the research to identify those bottlenecks, and then we explore potential solutions to remove those bottlenecks. And those are the kind of projects, the ones that work on those solutions, that we would like to see in our incubation core unit. So, for example, if we identify the need for let's say legal advice for core units, because our research has shown that new teams people are hesitant to join because they have questions around liability. Well, then we would conclude that it's a priority to have a legal core unit that works around liability and takes away the concerns that people may be having. And in that way, removing that bottleneck and making sure that the ecosystem can grow faster in a sustainable way. So that's the kind of process that we would follow to determine which projects would have a place in our incubation program. The assumption is that there will be many other core units that also run incubation programs to further their objectives. So it's not because you're a team that wants to start something that doesn't fit in what we are trying to achieve, that there isn't another core unit where you can join the incubation program. We do believe that incubation programs are critical elements to help onboard new teams in the ecosystem, mostly because yeah, it's just not easy to get from zero to the point where you know everything to put in your MIP and then ultimately get your budget approved.
Sorry for any background noise, and thank you for the answer, Wouter. A follow-up question would be, what are the plans for when core units leave the incubation program? Are they simply released into the wild and act as separate core units, or what's the relation between the SES core unit and the incubated core units? Thank you.
Yeah, so when they go through the incubation program, of course, we offer support in the form of our domain knowledge, our expertise about the maker ecosystem. So to make sure that their business model makes sense, that the budget that they created makes sense, that ultimately the MIP that they write up, that we believe that it's a good proposal. We support them financially throughout that process, and we also, by giving our vote of confidence and hopefully building a reputation for ourselves of spinning out valuable core units, that hopefully would increase the chances of that new core unit receiving ultimately the funding from governance and no longer through our own incubation program. And that really is the point of graduation. That's the moment when the core unit and the team has fully figured out what they want to do, that they have written everything up in a coherent proposal, and that they are now ready to receive the funds through governance instead of through our own incubation program. Now, your question is very relevant. So then do we just like drop them like a stone and wish them good luck? Not at all. So that's the reason why we have these other elements. And you may have noticed the advisory area in the strategy that was presented, which is exactly aimed at continuing support to these core units even after they have spun out. So we really like to gently onboard people, make sure that they are set up for maximum success. And then even as they quote unquote graduated by now receiving their budget directly through governance, that we can still further support them through the advisory program.
Anna has another question, but I think it fits better after Lenka goes through the decentralize the workforce.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. I'm Lenka. I'm part of the X-ray research project, and I will just very briefly touch upon the decentralized workforce domain and how this particular project addresses it. So if we zoom out to the strategy and vision of the core unit, then we are focusing on the sustainable growth of MakerDAO protocols molds through research. And our focus in particular is on the workforce and more specifically tech talent. The main objective that we are trying to achieve with X-ray is to end up with the best and most successful onboarding experience for the new participants in this ecosystem, and also ensuring the highest possible retention rate in the industry. And sub-objectives that I would consider as the high-level ones for the X-ray research, not going into too much detail, would be understanding what are the best practices out there so that we can establish the best-in-class standards for our developer onboarding and retention for specific to the MakerDAO protocol. Secondly is collection of data that can lead to delivering a model with metrics and bottlenecks that is close to real-time and accurate picture snapshot overview of the tech talent onboarding and retention that can help us to understand where we're at and base our decision. And thirdly, using these findings to propose a set of future projects that can address these detected bottlenecks that we come across and rank them by the importance and the resources we have available. This is the high level introduction into the X-ray. And in the next slide, I want to show you the draft of the model that we would use to address this issue. So as Wouter mentioned, we'll be also introducing the new roles into the ecosystem. So for by tech talent, you can consider a group of developers, be that smart contract engineers, backend developers, front-end developers, integrations engineers, etc., but also other tech roles. And these were, as mentioned, business analysts, project architects, quality assurance leads, researchers, tech community stewards, or UX UI designers. What you see in this funnel, just very briefly, different stages that we need to get the tech talent through or towards, and then also the processes which are focusing on different goals. So just to give an example, for instance, in the awareness stage, you can see that the process that is ongoing is marketing. So a marketing process is all about visibility and discoverability. So here the main goal or focus will be making sure that the community outside of the crypto community that we're part of is aware of the opportunities that there are in the maker ecosystem. And one possible bottleneck we can identify in the awareness stage would be that maybe these talents, which are potential candidates, heard about blockchain, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and DeFi, but never heard about Maker. So one of the ways to identify this could be possibly to do more marketing efforts to make sure that Maker comes up as a possible option to consider. Then just touching about the, let's say, onboarding process, the focus here is all about smooth experience and habit building. So we want to make sure that it is easy to understand what is needed and it's easy to get started for these talents. So for instance, in the consideration stage, we might run into the identification of a bottleneck that these potential candidates, they do not consider working for Maker as a real job. So we need to make sure that this is a clear option for them and show them examples and demonstrate how they can get involved. For the commitment part, maybe they do not know how to actually plug into the system. Maybe, as Wouter mentioned, they have legal concerns or they need other support. This could be through the incubator, etc., or help with the information. So this could be other way to address these. So this is just a high-level model we'll be working with to share with you, and yeah, to cover the decentralized workforce, which spans further on because, as you see, all the different elements of the core unit efforts are connected, but this is the part that X-Ray plays in.
Now, do you want to ask your question? I'm not sure if you have a mic.
Oh, sorry, I haven't seen the question.
Yeah, I just asked a question earlier before you presented this, all of these slides, Lenka, but I was curious because you mentioned that one of your highest priorities is onboarding and retaining top talent to grow the protocol. And so I was just curious if that extended to individuals or if it was strictly about incubating teams and incubating core units that will then benefit the protocol. But I think you largely answered that question, but if you want to expand a little bit more about that versus individual versus core unit incubation, that was kind of my question.
Absolutely. I believe that the best start is to focus on the individuals, but of course there are parts that could be relevant to the teams and individuals that are looking to form a team. So definitely relevant, but we would start the research with focus on the individuals.
And the reason why I put back this slide and I just wanted to add that yeah, the sponsorship covers the whole spectrum because we believe that we might catch different individuals or ideas at different stages, and there are different ways of testing or exploring these different opportunities with different experiments, and finally see if there's something to work with or not, right? So it's a bit of doing that in a controlled way that can scale, and this goes a little bit to what Wouter was explaining on the funnel about working.
Actually, if you go to the next slide that we're going to show with the implementations, what you will notice is that sponsorship is not just the incubation program. It also contains a number of grants, and there are different grants for different situations. So you have the micro grants for really small tasks, basically something, something that needs to be done. Someone wants to do it, and we can give just a limited budget to make that particular thing happen. The individuals that you are talking about may go a step further and not just do one thing, but try and get a scholarship grant. Or if there's a somewhat larger project that that we believe would be useful to improve the sustainable scaling of the ecosystem, then a team could apply for a development grant, for example, to build a job platform, for example, if that would be useful for the scaling of the ecosystem. And the incubation program is that's kind of the full-blown thing that incorporates all that, but then ultimately leads into the creation of an independent core unit. And so yeah, I hope it's clear that we're trying to cover the whole range from not just an individual even, but individual tasks up to the point of permanent new core units.
Yeah, I think that really answers my question. My follow-up was that, how do you imagine this incubation of talent? And is it more about like helping map people to projects, or is it about helping people navigate how they can propose their own and then start their own units and join teams? But I think he also kind of covered that in as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, oh, sorry.
We have a more detailed slide about how we envision the incubation program, but maybe we can go through the rest of the presentation first.
Just to complete the idea on this slide, there are a lot of these research projects or applied research that we've already started with, and we'll share the link for with all the work that we've been doing. So everything is open. But yeah, as we mentioned in the beginning, we want to do the backlog and the roadmap and make sure that this is very open for everyone to come and start working on issues that the DAO has. Then the dog food program, this is how would you create a core unit. So we're documenting everything that we are doing to make sure that it's easier for the coming core units. And this doesn't relate to the Incubes, right? But any core unit that, or any person that wants to create a core unit, they can use this documentation that dog food will generate to do that. Well, then Lenka already covered X-ray and how do we attract talent and how we nurture that funnel. And finally, the guardrail is about making sure that we are resilient enough and we have enough security from the workforce point of view to make sure that the DAO is actually decentralized. Wouter already covered the sponsorship arm quite well. And the last thing is the advisory, which I kind of touched upon in the very beginning about these reporting standards and best practices with the self-accountability audit. So those three are linked together, and we want to make sure that we do that ourselves and start make sure that becomes a best practice. So we have a way of controlling each other. Then another thing that we want to do is the ceremony facilitation. Our team has a lot of people that have been working with this with these methodologies for quite a while, so we can help other core units to get started with that. And finally, the dark spells that I mentioned in the beginning. So that's for the research part, and for the incubation part, we've already started doing some research about that. Wouter, if you want to explain a little bit more about this.
Yes. So as it stands, the SES core unit, assuming the proposal is accepted, then we will start in June, not just with the research projects that we touched on, but already with a number of teams as a part of the incubation program. A few of these teams are people who previously worked at the foundation and are looking for some additional guidance and some synergies that can happen there before they actually start their own core unit. And then we have a few new ones that, as I mentioned, fit within the scope of our incubation program, which is to work on specific issues, bottlenecks that we identify to that inhibit the growth of the ecosystem. So as you can see, we have the integrations team, all people from the foundation with Nikolai, Manuel, and Petru. We have the JavaScript product development team, which is a really nice mix of people who have been working at the foundation for quite a while, also new joiners. And so Raphael, for example, doesn't currently work for the foundation, but is involved in the new JavaScript product development core unit. We have Adam, who recently joined the foundation, and then we have our OGs, Phil, Tyler, and Tiago, who have been working at the foundation for quite a while. So one of the things I mentioned is that the scope for our own incubation program is quite focused. It's focused on those solutions to the bottlenecks that we identify in the growth of the ecosystem. So we believe that the incubation program pattern will be applied by multiple core units, not just ourselves, potentially with different focus points and different scopes for their incubation programs. These incubation programs, they also contribute to the capital allocation problem, because it helps to have a more experienced team that can take decisions as to how the capital is allocated, which projects receive funding to become their own core units. So that's why we believe that it would be useful to have a separate core unit that focuses specifically on the incubation part, and that doesn't have the specific scope that we are trying to cater to. So that's why there is an incubation core unit also in our own incubation program, with a number of people who have experience in building remote teams and making that work. So that's Bart, Lisbeth, Kathleen, and Jelle, who I've worked with before I joined the Maker Foundation, and who I know have quite a lot of experience in this area. Then other teams that we are looking to form in the context of the incubation program is a second smart contracts development team next to, of course, the protocol engineering core unit that is starting quite soon now. The reason why we believe that the second smart contracts development team would greatly contribute to the scalability of the ecosystem is that that bottleneck that we talked about, the fact that everything currently, every new functionality needs to pass through the protocol engineering core unit. And with this smart contracts team in the incubator program, we want to figure out how we can work in parallel, how we can have multiple smart contract core units working next to each other, increasing that throughput, the work throughput that we talked about. And of course, the funnel that I presented is very relevant in that respect, because that would be the work model that would allow us to do that. And then, as we have also alluded to, of course, there are a lot of open questions around the legal structure of the DAO, as everything that we're doing is very new. So we are working with a number of people to explore possibilities to form one or more legal core units that would specifically target those challenges that are inhibiting the growth of the ecosystem. So all these teams are supported by the SES permanent team, and that's Juan, that's myself, Lenka, and then the many people who are also working hard to make this happen. I think almost all of them on this call. So Jordan, Andy, Amy, Juan Carlos. We have a legal strategy advisor who will announce on a later stage, and then we're also looking for other additional profiles, such as a additional tech profile to join us, and also a junior hire and potentially other roles. So that will be the state when we start as a core unit. So we will really hit the ground running, and make sure that things happen quite soon.
If there are no questions about that, we would like to cover the next steps. So yeah, we got some feedback and we are looking for more. So if you have any feedback, please let us know either in the forums or directly messaging us. But one of the things that we need to do is specify the budget implementation, the limits and the process. Nicola and Wouter have been working about doing this in a good way, and we believe that this way could be potentially one of the best practices until something more sophisticated can be created at the smart contract level. Then we need to update the budget MIP. So as we just mentioned, there are some newly recruited members, and we are happy to welcome them. We think that they make our team much stronger, so we need to include that as well. And we also are going to include a preliminary maker compensation plan following what the smart contracts team did, and waiting for the for this framework that the working group is doing. What's more, we're going to share the approach that we are using with the working group. We think that it's a very fair approach, so we'll be sharing it with them in case they want to either use it or be inspired by it. Finally, yes, 1 week from now exactly, it's the deadline, so we need to incorporate all the feedback that we get and make sure that it goes in before the freeze date or freeze deadline, I guess. And then a week later, we'll make the formal submission, so the 5th of May. And then, yeah, the rest is waiting for the decision of governance and any fun practical preparation, such as setting up multi-sigs and legal entities, and finally launching. Well, we kind of believe that we launched already because we've been working a lot on different things, but it will be the official launch. If you want to contact us, everyone is on this Discord channel, so you're welcome to join us and ask as many questions as you would like. And we have this public drive that I commented earlier. So if you want to see what we're working on and our work, it's open over there. Our emails and Rocket Chat and forum aliases are below the page. And with 3 minutes left to the top of the hour, do you guys have any questions? We apologize for the lengthy presentation.
Yeah, Anna, you had additional questions about the incubation program. So maybe Juan, you can just show the overview of the incubation program as we currently envision
Yes.
it. So right now we're seeing basically 4 different tracks that every team in the incubation program would go through. One is the business model track that would make sure that the mission, vision, strategy makes sense. That if there are any products and services that are offered, that these are clearly defined, that there is a good roadmap with OKRs and so on, and that the timeline is sufficiently defined. Of course, another part of going through the incubation program is the people aspect. So which roles and responsibilities are necessary in the team. We will support the team in the hiring of the right people, making sure that commitments are made, gradually commitments are made to actually join the core unit, and then offer support in terms of compensation and recruiting to make sure that as I mentioned, we set the new core unit up for success with the best people that we can find. On a more practical level, we have the operations track that deals with things like the kind of reporting that is necessary as a core unit, what the budget should look like, the legal structure, the processes, project management, the tools, a lot of emphasis, for example, on remote work and how to make that work successfully. And then the 4th track would be around education, learning about the maker ecosystem, the governance infrastructure, about core units, budgets, and so on. but also for specialized roles, such as, for example, when you want to start as a smart contract developer, which kind of resources should you use and which skills should you have before you can get started? Thinking back about the tiered model, like would you work as a tier 3, 2, or 1 smart contract developer, and what exactly does that entail? Smart contract developers are, of course, only one role. So we have backend service developers. We have a whole range of people, including also unique DAO roles, such as the facilitator and the core unit team lead roles. So there's a lot to learn, making sure that that people really have all the gaps covered in their prior experience and knowledge, so that they can also hit the ground running and get started as a fully functional core unit. And then when everything is in place, we believe that the team should be ready to do the maker improvement proposal and submit that for their own independent budget from the governance community. So that's, in a nutshell, the process that we have in mind.
Any other questions?
Yeah, be cognizant of the time, but also if you do have questions, feel free to ask them. The forum links are always live. I know we pushed them at the start of the meeting. Maybe I can send them out again. That way you can ask your questions and get them answered if you think of them later.
All right. So either everything is super clear or completely obscure. I hope it's the first one. But again, if you guys want to join us in the conversation, we really appreciate any feedback that you might have here or in the forum. And yeah, we'll be formally submitting this very soon. So stay tuned.
Yeah, second that, everyone. Thanks for joining, and there was a lot of information to process. So if there is anything else, then feel free to post your question or comments in the forum.
Thank you, guys.
Have a good one.